Hello, welcome back to Jen's Books. This video is going to be a summary of my reading for June. Unfortunately, and compared to previous months this year, I've only actually read 7 books, but my goodness, there are some stonkers here for me to share with you, and I'm really looking forward to finding out what you think if you've read any of these books or whether you'd be inspired to read any of them. So, gosh, there's such a wide diversity of things I've read this month. We've got thrillers, we've got historical novels, we've got poetry, we've got dystopian, ultra-violent novel, all sorts of stuff, and a western to boot. So a real variety, and hopefully something for everybody amongst all these books. And as I say, I've not read so many this month, but boy, there's been some really good reads along the way. So the first book I read in June was The Hike by Lucy Clarke. So this is a thriller. Lucy Clarke wrote One of the Girls, which I've previously talked about in one of my videos. This has come out this year. It's kind of, you know, I mean, it's a good read. I enjoyed it. It's kind of formulaic. I kind of wish that I hadn't read her previous novel so recent to this, because there's certainly a formula to how the stories are told. But saying that, I'll be honest, you know, the twist still got me. I wasn't expecting the twist that came out. So she still surprised me, and I still couldn't put the book down, and it was full of twists and turns, but it did remind me a bit about One of the Girls. But if you like a good thriller, then you'll probably enjoy this, particularly if you've read Lucy Clarke before. So the idea is there's 4 friends going hiking in Norway. They've all got their own secrets that are going to unfold through the journey that they take together. Basically, they take turns picking a location for a holiday, and this year they've decided to go you know, and challenge themselves by climbing this mountainous pass in Norway. Throw in a mystery of a missing woman who disappeared the year before, and you've got, you know, lots of questions already from the beginning. And when they meet the locals, some of which are more friendly than others, you know, the cat amongst the pigeons is set, and events start to unravel. So the characters are Liz, Maggie, Joni, who's a famous singer, and Helena, and they all take turns in their point of view. So again, quite similar to other books that I've read by Lucy Clarke, but it's quite nice in a way because you get a variety of different voices, and it also jumps in time as well. So we have the characters of the girls who are on this holiday, then we jump back in time to the search for the missing girl as well. So there's lots going on here, and as I say, some really good twists and turns that still I didn't expect when I was reading them. And, like, you know how I love books about remote places, mountains and things like that. So in terms of location, fantastic location, and ticked all the boxes for me. And if you like a sort of, as I say, a sort of quick thriller type read, this is definitely one that I would recommend. Secondly, I read a short poetry collection which I've mentioned before in one of my hauls by Pat Edwards, and it's called Hail Marys. It's by Infinity Books UK, which is where you can order it. And what grabbed my attention about this is I really love the premise. All the poems in this short collection are about different historical characters called Mary. So you've got Mary Berry to Mary Shelley to Mary Wollstonecraft, Mother Mary, and there's a variety of different forms in here as well. But each of the poems is kind of very story driven. You know, there's a real narrative to them. So if you're interested in history and historical female figures, I think this is probably one that you would enjoy. There's a really effective use of language, and there's loads of heart, but there's also humour as well in these collection of poems. So if you enjoy poetry and think that's up your street, then I would definitely recommend that from the lovely Pat Edwards. So that was my next read. After that was something that I couldn't resist, and I've mentioned this on one of my haul videos, The Woman in the Library. Look at the cover, how could you not buy that? And that's by Sulari Gentill. And I really love this book. I really enjoyed it. It's like nothing I've ever read before, and even trying to describe it, actually I had to really think about it, because it's a story within a story within a story, that kind of a theme. If you like those sorts of books, you'll like it. But it's a thriller, it's a mystery. So basically it's a novel that's being written and sent in chunks to the novelist's greatest fan. So the novel is about somebody writing a novel in Boston, but the writer's actually based in Australia, and her fan lives in America, and so he's giving her tips about locations and things that she might get wrong about the, you know, the language, etc. But it's about four characters who are in a library, Boston Library, when they hear a scream and they discover that a young woman has been murdered. And again, fabulous twist in this. Didn't expect the ending until right at the end. You know, every time that I thought I'd you know, worked out who it was going to be, it wasn't. And in the end, you know, the ending was kind of quite sudden, but it did surprise me. But this sort of, these interesting characters that slowly come to life of Kane, Freddie, Marigold and Wit. They're the four characters. Freddie is the character in the novel who's writing the novel. It sounds more complicated than it reads, and as I say, it really threw me. And then alongside the novel within the novel, you have this relationship between the author and her greatest fan, who, you know, think Misery. There's something a little bit sinister going ahead here. But yeah, really enjoyed this book. It said it won some sort of award, Best Indie Novel in Crime Fiction Lover Awards 2022. And yeah, really enjoyed it. I think it is an Australian writer as well. But as I say, unlike nothing I've read before, there's aspects of a sort of schlocky thriller mystery, as the sort of the image on the front kind of indicates. But I really cared about the characters by the end, and was quite sad when I realised the novel was about a novelist writing about their lives rather than the novelist writing about her life. Well, you'll have to just read it and see what you think. But really recommend this, The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentill. Really enjoyed it, a good page turner, if you like a good mystery with a small cast. So after that, I read another collection of poems, which I'm going to have to include a photo here. And the reason I haven't got the book anymore is because I loved it so much. I lent it to somebody almost immediately after I'd read it. I was like, you have to read this. It's absolutely fabulous. And it's Liz Berry's The Home Child. And it's a novel told through poems. Don't let it put you off if you're not a massive poetry reader. It's just, fabulous. I've read quite a bit of Liz Berry's work before, but for me, this is, you know, by far the most enjoyable of her collections. As I say, you know, it's very story driven. It's the story about a young girl who is removed from her family after both her parents die. She becomes an orphan, and her brother's not deemed old enough to look after her. So she lives in the Black Country in England, and it's taking place right at the turn of the century, sort of 1908. And she is part of a programme that sent thousands of children to Nova Scotia to live new lives in Canada. And the author is actually writing, she's basing this sort of story about one of her relatives. So although it's fictionalised, there are lots of elements about this that she's drawing on from real life and her family's experiences. And it's so beautiful. The poems vary in form, but they're all very, you know, easy to access, and the language is just beautiful. The visual elements are really striking, which for me with poetry is like quite a big deal, and it's compelling. I couldn't put it down. I you know, I wanted to keep on reading to find out what happens about this girl as she moves you know, from England to this farm in the middle of nowhere in Nova Scotia. And as I say, there's this representation as well of this journey that took place for thousands of young people. And it's something that I didn't really know a lot about. I knew that you know, people had been sent to, you know, the colonies in Australia, but I didn't know much about this. And actually, when I did my DNA test a few years ago now, I discovered I've got relatives over in that way. So it made me wonder, is there a link there? You know, did one of my relatives get sent over in the same sort of time period? But it's haunting, it's lyrical, it's spellbinding, it's heartbreaking. I just really, 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 really love this. And if you like poetry, would definitely recommend. Or if you think the themes, you know, will intrigue you, but haven't really read a lot of poetry, still really recommend. It's just a fabulous collection. So that's The Home Child, and that came out this year, 2023, with Liz Berry. And again, I'll put the image up there for anyone who is interested. From the sublime to the ridiculous, the next read is one that I didn't think came out till July, but I saw it in the airport, so picked it up immediately because it had been on my radar for some time, and one that I really wanted to read. But again, as I say, completely different, and it's Chain Gang All Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. And I think he's originally written some short stories, but I think this might be his first novel. And wow, I think we're going to be talking about this one for a while. It's not a book that I loved to read, but for very good reasons. The themes are really dark. It's getting to grips with a lot of really powerful material and themes. What I would do is, if you're a bit concerned about triggers, you know, read a bit more about the book, because it covers all sorts of stuff. It's very violent, and it's an inspection really of the prison system that's not unlike the prison system in America currently. And basically the story is in this alternative world, in this dystopian world. People in the prison system have the option to basically become gladiators, where they can fight to the death or win their freedom by surviving so many matches. And they become they're called chains from different prisons, and they're forced to march all over the country from town to town, where they then battle to the death, you know, in these arenas. And in this particular chain, the lead of the chain is a character called Loretta Funwar, and she's in a romantic relationship to the person in the chain below her, who is Hurricane Stacks. So there's lots of violence in this. It opens up with some quite violent scenes in the you know, in the auditorium, where these people are fighting to the death from the start, and there's, you know, there's obviously a lot of that in there. It also talks about murder, suicide. It talks about sexual attack. It really explores you know, the impact of the penal system on people of different races, and how it's stacked against Black Americans essentially. And also it talks about trans people, and so there's loads, there's so much in here. And what I really loved about it is, throughout the book there's like these little footnotes that are facts from reality about the penal system in America, and that really kind of brings it home the similarities between, you know, this fictitious story and, you know, the fact that it's not a million miles away. It sort of shines a light on all of those problems. So really difficult to read, really difficult to read, but also really interesting to read as well. And so sort of it feels like Hunger Games, but mixed with gladiators, but definitely for grown-ups. But it's also about what it is to be a voyeur and to watch while these events are happening and not do anything about it. And we become implicit in that as readers of the book. And so that feeling uncomfortable, I think, is probably quite intentional. And we go through the eyes of different characters. So we look through the eyes of Furwa herself, but we also look through the eyes of the daughter of one of her good friends who's been killed in prison, and also, you know, a husband and wife who were quite obsessed with watching this, which is broadcast on TV. So there's lots of different points of view coming through. But yeah, it's quite a challenging book to read, but I think it's one, as I say, that is communicating a really important message, and I think is probably one that we're going to hear more about as the year goes on. I don't think it's going to be a flash in the pan. I think it's one that people are going to talk about. So yeah, challenging read, but an interesting one, definitely. And I'm definitely glad that I read it. Next, I read True Grit by Charles Portis. So we're going back in time a bit. When I was a kid, my granddad read just hundreds of westerns, and it's not a genre I have to say I've read a huge amount of, but I am going to do a six from the shelf about westerns. And a lot of the books that I'm talking about are quite sort of modern takes on that sort of historical period. But to balance it out, I wanted to read something that was a little bit older. So this is from 1968, so it's not massively old, but I really, really love this book. I really, really enjoyed it. I've watched the film, which was out about 13 years ago, but the problem I had was I couldn't always understand what Jeff Bridges was saying. He plays Cockburn in it, Rooster Cockburn, and Cogburn, and there were bits where I just couldn't understand what he was saying, but at least in the book you can understand what he's saying, because it's told all through the eyes of Mattie Ross, who is basically a young girl who has lost her father, and she travels to do some business on his behalf and pick up his body. He's murdered by somebody that her father had taken in and given a home and given work to, and she sets it upon herself that she's going to see justice for this event. So she's just this fabulous first person narrator who is this mixture of being quite naive in some respects, but also really plucky and really courageous and really brave. She's just wonderful. It's a little bit dated in parts. There are some terms in here that, you know, you might find offensive, but I think you have to sort of take it in the time that it was written. It's not horribly so, but there are a few bits. There are descriptions, for example, of Black Americans, which, you know, I could have done without. You know, I found would you know, be quite offensive, but generally overall it's just this fantastic romp as she engages this this guy called Rooster Cogburn, who's a US Marshal, who is a drunk, basically, pays him money to help her bring in Richard, is it Cheney, Tom Cheney, the guy who killed her father. And that first person narrator is really what drives the whole book. It's just great. It's just great. It's fabulous. If you've not read this before, and you've not, even if you've not read westerns or anything like that before, I'd still really, really recommend it. That first person point of view of Mattie is just wonderful. She's just an absolute joy to read. And the ending is also really heartbreaking and powerful. And yeah, it's quite a quick read. But definitely enjoy this. And I'll be talking about this again in my upcoming six from the shelf too, so you won't have heard the end of it, but I can understand why it's quite popular. There's actually a afterword by Donna Tartt in here as well, who says it's one of her favourite novels, and I can really understand why. It's just fabulous. Yeah, one of the best narrators I think I've ever read, that first person girl, and she's just so plucky and brave, and she introduces you to this world in a way that is completely accessible. But yeah, it's fabulous. Definitely read if you've not read. And last of all, I've read Geraldine Brookes' Year of Wonders. This is one that's been on my TBR for a while. Again, you know, it's kind of themes that interest me. It's a kind of apocalyptic, but based in fact, because it's about the Black Death passing through England in 1665, 1666. And it's about a parish, a little Derbyshire village called Aham. It's based on reality, actually. They shut themselves away and won't let anybody leave or won't let anybody come in. And it's about how the Black Death ravages their village. But more than that, there's all this intrigue and relationships between these characters. With everything's told through the eyes of Anna Frith, who you know, goes for her own tragedies early on in the book, and her relationship with the local rector and his wife, and the sorts of different reactions that the people have to the events that are unfolding. So there's all sorts of stuff in here. It's not you know, just a simple A to B story. There's all sorts of side stories going on and different issues with the different characters. Really densely plotted, actually, but also very enjoyable. There's real hope there as well. It's sad. Um, it is obviously really sad because, you know, we see the deaths of 2/3 of their village during this time while they're keeping themselves to themselves, but it's really illuminating. I mean, I've read quite a lot about, or books based around the time of the Black Death, but I feel like I kind of lived through a bit of it through reading this book, and it didn't break my heart in the way that Hamnet did. It didn't make me sob my eyes out, which you know, it's, I don't think it's because it holds its punches. I think there's a certain distance in the through the narrator from the events that didn't put me over the edge in the same way that Hamlet did. But it's really interesting. This is a strong woman who overcomes a lot to you know, be a survivor really and retell her experiences. So yeah, another really good stonker of a book. In fact, you know, I think, as I say, I've not read a huge amount this month, but the books I've read have all been fabulous. I'd recommend any of them for different reasons. You know, if you like a thriller, obviously The Hike might be the one for you. If you want something that's more of a social commentary and a bit more challenging, you've got Chain Gang, All Stars, but all sorts. But True Grit, really loved that. That was a real pleasant surprise. Although I'd really enjoyed the film, as I say, I think, you know, that old adage, the book's better than the film. Certainly. So that's my roundup for June. I need to do a bit of a totting up to see how far I've got to in my 100 books. I'm still aiming for that. I don't think there's going to be any problem in reaching it, but perhaps not quite so many extras as I was hoping I'd get through. But I'd really like to know what your thoughts are. If you're new to the channel and want to have some more reviews and join me on my challenge to read 100 books in 2023, do like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks again for coming along. Take care. Bye.